Okay, today I'm going to be starting out with this watercolor lesson tutorial by showing you how to tape your board into, you need 24 squares. So I have this little skinny tape right here, and I've made a few marks on my board because this needs to be, we need 4 spaces up the side this direction, and then we'll need 6 spaces that way. So I think I have got it kind of marked out so that it'll work out that way. You want to tear this little skinny tape so that it'll go clear across the whole piece of paper, and if you don't quite get it where I've done that there, then you can add a little piece of paper. So right here I've missed getting that whole thing done. So now I will fix that in a minute. So next, let me do the next piece. Try to get it a little bit longer this time. And I'm not pushing it down, clear down right now, because I want to be sure that I've got it in the right spot. So if I don't push it down really hard, I can always do a little adjusting as I do that. So I'm going to continue to lay this tape out, going this direction. That looks fairly even. This doesn't have to be perfect because this is just exercises to learn techniques, and so it's not going to end up being part of your final project. So I think I can go ahead and push these all the way down now, and I'll start doing the same thing the opposite direction. I've got it pretty well spaced out here. I can do a little adjusting if I need to. I think for the most part I've got it pretty well done, so I'm going to go ahead and push those pieces down, and now I'm ready to get set up so that I can start showing you the techniques. Here's my workspace ready to go. I've got 2 jars of water for my watercolor. One is going to be for clean water and one will be for dirty water. I've got my paint, and I have a couple of brushes laying right here. I have some supplies that I'll be using a little later on with the watercolor techniques. And then here, my board is laying flat. I'm actually going to take this basket and prop my board on top of it so that it's not laying flat, and it actually watercolor works pretty well if it has a little bit of a tilt. So I'll show you that in just a second. So as you can see, my watercolor board is now sitting at an angle. I've just put that little basket underneath it. You could use your supply tray and just put underneath your board. Inside your assignment folder, you're going to find a worksheet that looks like this. Before you begin this portion of the assignment, I want you to read over what watercolor is like, the different brushes, the different surfaces, and some of the supplies that you may not need. And you wouldn't need all of these things for in our class. This would just be for if you were doing watercolor on your own, maybe outside of school. The next step is going to be, we're going to be working with the characteristics of watercolor. Before you begin each step of this, in this video, I'm going to assume that you have read each paragraph and the description of what a wash is, what color mixing is, transparent and opaque, staining, tinting, and glazes. And you'll need to read the description of what that is, and then I'm going to just show you the technique. One of the first things we do before we begin painting with watercolors, we'll use clean water, and we need to get the pigments wet. So I'm just going to drip a little bit of water into each pigment. You won't be using white, I just wet that down, but you really don't want to use white. In our watercolor experimenting and learning with techniques, I want you to pretend like you don't even have white. And typically there's not white in here, usually there's black. And then if you do have a tray that runs out of pigments that doesn't like this pigment right here, we can replace that. I have replaceable colors for you, so just let me know. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is read this, and we're going to be doing a flat wash. And just as a reminder, a flat wash is an area of color that does not vary in hue or value. Use the same color and try to make the entire section of uniform color and value. I'm going to move this over just a bit so I can show you hopefully get my paint palette in here at the same time as your paint. I don't know if you can see that very well. So what I'm going to do is dip my water, my flat brush is what I'm going to use for a wash. They work better than a round brush usually for a wash. I'm dipping it in water, and then I'm going to load it with pigment. So I'm just going to choose a color. It doesn't really matter at this point what color you want, but I don't want it to be too runny, so let me run across. So I'm going to run my paint across the top of the board. I think I have a little too much water in my brush, so I'm going to tap it out on my paper towel. So I'm going tap, tap, tap to just get a little of the liquid out of my brush, and we're going to start that over. Then, as I paint, my brush is going to overlap the last line of color, and sometimes I'll reload that brush in between each row, and then I'm going to just keep painting it all the way down. Sometimes you have to get a little more water, but you're trying to cover this square up with the same amount of paint all the way down so that it doesn't vary in color. And this is not my best sample ever. But as you go down the board, it doesn't get lighter, it stays the same color. Now, if for some reason you've messed up and it doesn't look very good, you can go ahead and do it again, but so there's a few problems with that. One is that you'll have to start at the beginning and overlap it all the way down to the bottom, and sometimes you end up wiping away more paint than you put on. So let's just try that one more time. So I'm just trying to even out my paint. The important thing is to overlap each stroke, and sometimes you'll need to reload your brush. Okay? So that's number one. Number two is graded. It's an area of color that does not vary in hue but does in value. So after the first stroke of the color, gradually add more water until the final stroke is plain water. On a square this size, I won't be able to take you won't be able to take it clear to plain water, but you definitely can get it lighter. So I'm going to start here with some thicker pigment, go across the top just like I did before. Okay, and then I'm going to add clean water to my brush with every brush stroke. If it gets a little, it does tend to get a little runny, so you can see that it's beading here, and I'm going to overlap that bead, and we want to draw that bead of paint that's running down to the bottom. So as I go, I keep adding a little bit more water, and it should get lighter and lighter as I go to the bottom. Okay, if you have extra water running down here at the edge of your tape, where it's pooling up, if you take your brush, dab it on your paper towel a little bit, then you can rub it right along the edge and pick up that extra water, okay, that excess water. Okay, so the next row, the next square is going to be variegated. That's an area of a color that changes hue and may vary in value. Begin the wash with one color, and then without rinsing the first color out the brush, start adding the second color, overlapping the previous stroke. The final stroke should be the second color only. Now, I don't recommend that you put your paint right up here, but I want to let you see what I'm doing with the paint. I would, when you're doing this in class, I'd keep your paint off your prepared paper. But I'm just doing this so you can see as I grab the paint. So I'm going to fill my brush with orange paint, do a couple of rows. Without rinsing, I'm going to come and pick up yellow paint. And then with each brush stroke, I'm going to get more yellow. So that hopefully as I go down my square, my paint, need a little more water, my paint will get yellow, more and more yellow. So that in the process of this, we've gone from orange to yellow. Okay, this next segment is going to be color mixing. And we're going to choose two colors to experiment with as we do this. So number 4, the fourth square, let me slide that over so we can see it, will be mixed on palette. Mixed on palette just means that you're going to use a palette, and right here I have this watercolor palette. This is the lid, and that becomes my palette to mix on. If you need more mixing space, maybe later on when you're doing your final project for this, you can use a plate to mix your colors on, and with watercolor, a white plate works really well because then you can see what the color is going to look like on top of your white paper. If your paint tray is really dirty, this one's actually really pretty clean considering that you know, most of them are dirtier than this. If yours is too dirty, then go to the sink and clean that off before you start mixing colors. So this first one is going to be mixed on palette. I'm going to thoroughly mix colors and place mixture on palette. Notice how often over-mixing colors causes them to be chalky and muddy when dry. So I'm just going to take green, and then I'm going to add some blue. Okay, and I'm just going to really mix them up so that I can see what's happening. And sometimes if you mix and mix and mix with watercolor, you can end up with a kind of a chalky looking color. So now that I've got it mixed, I'm going to paint it here in this square so that you can see the color that I got. Okay, so now, I don't know if you noticed, but I picked up color without rinsing out my brush. So if you have made your watercolor paint dirty, so over here when we did the variegated wash, our yellow got kind of dirty, and here I have green paint mixed in with my blue. The way to fix that is rinse your brush out in clean water, and then kind of dry it, dab it off a little bit on your paper towel, and then just stroke over it and brush it on your paper towel, and then do that again until you remove the paint. Doing it with your paintbrush is going to waste less paint than if you were to grab a paper towel and just soak up that extra paint or scrub it out with a paper towel or a sponge. So as I do that, I'm stroking over that with my brush, and then I'm brushing the dirty paint off on a paper towel, and then if I need to, I can re-wet my brush. So that's how you clean your paints when you're mixing them up, because sometimes you want to add color but you don't want to have to rinse out your brush, and that's just the way to take care of that. No harm done, and we're not wasting our paint. Okay, so the next number 5 is mixed on brush. Dip side of brush into a color and the other side into another color and gently brush this mixture onto the paper. So I like to do this with a flat brush, and I really think it gets a really cool effect. So I'm going to do it with the green. Okay, so I dipped it in blue first with this side of brush. I'm going to flip my brush over, and now I'm going to dip it in green. Okay, and now I'm going to brush it onto my paper. Let me see if I may need to move this over. So here we go. Now you can see that as I mix this down, you get a nice variegated effect, and the colors are mixing together as you go down. Okay. So that is mixed on brush. And the last one is mixed on the paper. And this one asks you to pre-wet a section and then lightly drop the 2 colors into the section. And then they want you to move the paper around to mix the color. So in order to do this, you're actually going to have to move the whole board around. So of course you're going to dip into your clean water jar. And then I'm going to wet the paper. And there's lots of watercolor techniques where you wet your paper before you paint on it, and this is just one. So now I'm going to take 2 colors. Let's see, we will do red, and then I'm going to get some yellow. A little more yellow. Okay, now I'm going to move my board around so I can get those to mix together a little bit. I might be out of the camera range right here, but I'm trying to get those to blend. So just see what happens as you let that paint flow into each other. And see if you can get that to mix together. So be patient, it takes a little while, and you'll have a little more freedom on how you move yours because you're not trying to videotape it. There we go. So once you can see that that's moving around, then you can tell that it kind of starts to blend together and to create the color you might expect yellow and red to create. Okay, so that's the next 3. We have mixed on palette, mixed on brush, and mixed on paper.